right. Should I start?
Okay, please go ahead. Yes.
All right. Yeah. So how many of you guys here actually read XKCD? Just raise your hand. Yeah. Well done. So for people who didn't know what XKCD comic is, it's a comic about there's some stick figures often arguing about some philosophical questions and the nerdy, geeky stuff. But for this particular one over here, I found it's quite interesting, quite related to the theme we're talking about tonight from someone who works in the tech industry and doing research in computer science. And so the next one over here, maybe you guys want to take a moment to think it in on what this graph says over here. So, so what this graph shows is also from XKCD comic. It's pretty plotting the number of people who walk, human beings who walk on another world other than Earth. As we know, the graph peaked around 1969 to 1970s because the 12 Apollo astronauts who actually walked on the moon, and that's the only other world that human beings actually walked in this universe. And the graph pretty much just started over there, peaked, and then recently Neil Armstrong just died in 2012, so we only left with 8 of them that have been walking in a different world than Earth. And the title text from this comic pretty much gave you this sense of the infinite regret that if we didn't take the irrational economic chance to go explore the space and utilize our technology in a sensible way. So, so this is the title of my talk, and usually as a scholar and scientist, we really speculate, and we oftentimes just hypothesize and often investigate and seek evidence. But since Trevor, he's a really persuasive organizer, so here goes nothing, my irresponsible speculation. So, if we think about the future, and this is a painting from Horizon Mural from 1993 that he painted in Disney land. It's almost like, how many of you guys have seen the movie Tomorrowland from Disney? Yeah, so I think this is really the inspiration for that movie. Disneyland is almost like a utopian world in our society that it's the happiest place, and this is what they imagine about the future is going to look like. And if you think about this picture as a utopia story, then what are the characters in this story, and where does it happen? And in my speculation, the utopia story happens with the protagonist as human, us. And they involve superintelligence, which presumably is our last invention. I will get into that shortly. And also the place for this story to happen is the space, the deep space, and presumably that will be the last colonization that human will ever do in our humanity history. So before we inspect the future, I want to take a moment to examine the past. So here's a graph of the global GDP. From the top one, the only difference between the two graphs is the scale of the x-axis. For people who couldn't see the numbers, the first graph shows from the year 8000 BC all the way to year 2000 AD. And so you see the GDP pretty much lays flat until the sharp peak around year 2000. And if we blow up this graph around the axis between the 1700 to year 2000 AD, then we can see that the takeoff of this graph really happened between 1850 and 1900, which unsurprisingly, that's the Industrial Revolution happened in mainly Europe. And of course, with the modernization of the digital computer that happened around 1950, that came out of, is also a byproduct of the Second World War, the graph just really took off. That the digital media that really helped in our daily life, that everyone's using some form of artificial intelligence in our daily life today, for example, Google. And there's another plot I want to show about the past. I promise those are the only two slides about the past. The rest will be the future. So here's a graph. Here's a table. It's about some of the strategic significant technology races that happened in our past. So for example, the nuclear bomb that happened and got brewed and produced in the Manhattan Project by the United States in 1995. And shortly after the Soviet Union, 4 years later, invented the same thing, and the same as United Kingdom and France, so on. So you will see, for similar technologies, the advancement happens really fast. One after the other, more than one country developed the same technology. But one observation here is, there is those irregular short gaps between the countries that follow one another, and the long gap between some other technologies. So ICBM is the intercontinental Baltic missile, and MIRV is another weapon system. But the idea is the gap of those inventions of the technology somehow enlaces between the different nations. And here's the reason I speculate is because you can only be copycat to achieve something if you're really close to the person you're chasing. It's like you're doing a race, right? You're doing Formula car race, and you can get a little bit drag force from a person in front of you, so to give you a lift. But if you're too far away from this race, and no one's going to help you. And look at the North Korea, for example. The technology came a lot later than the rest of the countries. So why am I talking about those old technologies? So that has something to do with the takeoff interval, the so-called takeoff interval of a technology. So this rooted to the evidence of the super intelligence. So here's the definition of intelligence, and more, I guess, easier way to understand what the intelligence means for an agent that acts in an environment is its power to organize and plan over the amount of resources it uses. So the less resources it uses, the more resources it gathers, the higher the intelligence it is. Versus a super intelligence often means intelligent being that's much smarter than the current human mind in this world. And that is inevitable because the benefit of, well, first of all, in order to have a super intelligence, at least we have human right now, the benefit of have something smarter than human in all areas is a very strategic advantage for any nation to have. Well, if you don't talk about military advantage, even think about the quantitative analysis of the stock market or the algorithmic trading that's happening in Wall Street. By having a computer that can calculate faster, trade much higher volume than the regular business, that one company or one hedge fund could just rule the entire Wall Street. And so if we think of this, the development of AI and the development of superintelligence, you may think, well, the whole thing is probably going to take a while because right now, if anyone has a smartphone, we all know the voice recognition system sucks, and it can possibly do anything more than good than the speech recognition system. But the interesting thing about the technology takeoff often happens in a very short burst period of time. Imagine any company like Google or Facebook has achieved a human-level artificial intelligence. And let's say Baidu, which is the tech company from the state of China, is lagging a year behind. Maybe you think a year is not too far away, and hopefully by a year later, every nation in this world will have the super intelligence, or at least human-level artificial intelligence. However, the transition between the technology from human intelligence to something self-evolving and achieve a greater level of intelligence could just happen in 6 months. And after that, there will be only one world domination power hence forming a new world order. And all the companies I'm showing here, they're actually currently researching and trying to pursue that goal of achieving artificial intelligence and presumably superintelligence. And this is an arms race in modern world happening right now. And this is just some of the applications that could happen comes along with the human level intelligence. And also there's some strategic benefit of superintelligence that every nation may take an interest in, including an AI system that can self-evolve, obviously, that can presumably become smarter and smarter, and also strategizing for all the resource planning and stuff, all the technology researches and stuff. So, in short, the superintelligence will be the last invention of human being. After that, it will be just this meta algorithm, a meta tool that inventing all the rest of the tool for us. So, the question I want to inspect is, what's the pathway to superintelligence? Because the pathway to technology advances often dictate the outcome and how we use those technologies. So in this graph, I think it highlights mainly two different paths to achieve superintelligence. So, as you know here, when I talk about superintelligence and artificial intelligence, I don't really necessarily restrict my notion to machines, because we all know with the advances of the genetic engineering, human could presumably achieve some level of superhuman capabilities. And let's closely look at a form like computers that's much easier to understand for us currently. So here's the Moore's law, which governs the number of transistors, which is translate to the computation powers we can have in the modern computer. And this graph over here I show really is just logarithm growth of the computation power we have in today modern society computer. And it doubles every 2 years. That's pretty much the graph shows us. So if this graph keeps increases, there's no surprising that we could achieve some form of superintelligence, at least has the computation capability of the superintelligence. Then, so in parallel with the Moore's law, we also have computer scientists who research in algorithm improvement and algorithm advances. So with the algorithm advances, we're able to compute things that instead of just using brute force by having faster and faster computers, we're also able to compute things that previously take a million years to compute in a matter of days by coming up with more advanced algorithm, which means a method of computing things by having a different mathematical model. And so you may think, well, these items and the improvement is nothing too surprising. And what about, so let me convince you even more why this could happen. So here's a list of the games that's more closely related to the advances of the so-called human intelligence. Many of those games, we actually the computer has achieved, or at least on par with the human performance. So let's examine the other path to achieve a superintelligence, which is the embryo selection. So we have this style company called 23andMe, which you can email, you can mail your salivas, and they will give you a technical report on your genetics. Well, sometimes it says you are 99% Asian and 1% African, something like that. But also it has capability of showing you all the genetic diseases you can potentially have. And with those technologies in the hindsight, the genetic engineering of the embryo is not too far away. I mean, imagine in the near future, when you give birth, before you actually give birth, you're able to go into this computer screen and select what your offspring is going to look like with different traits and things. And if we take this thought process to the extreme, if our society could have this technology available at our disposal, what could possible intellectual gain we could achieve as human race. Well, if we do a selection from 1 in 2 embryo selection, what we get on average 4 point in the IQs. But you can see there are a lot of rich people in society, and there's nothing stopping them by doing selections over generations of embryos. And that can possibly achieve some marvelous result. So those numbers should really be taken into consideration with respect to how those technologies are being adapted in the society, whether it's a society where only 0.1% of the families are adventurous in terms of trying those technology, or is it 99% of the family under some social or political influence. For example, in China or Singapore, people are more susceptible to having policies regarding their birth and things. For example, the one-child policy that happened in both countries. So over there, the government may encourage them to, or even subsidize the cost for the embryo selection for the population in those nations. And for the rest of the world, they may surely follow because of the advantage you could have over competing over the economy and resources. So what's left for the normal models of us? Well, the best case scenario, the best practice scenario, I think, is the superintelligence should be practiced and developed only on the benefit of all humanities and in service of the widely shared ethical ideals. And I'm going to skip over all the slides about the space because I'm running out of time. But the end is, so as we can see, the idea of the utopia, or the idea of the all best possible world, is only a reflection of our current reality. And it changes drastically from the 1550s, and which is the drawing of the Garden of Earthly Delight. And here, 400 later, you get a French drawing of the flying machine in Utopia, and which is very different than the idea presented today. And it may very well and have to be very different if we examine the utopia world and all the best possible world in the next 100 years. So as a bonus, food for thought. So we all know as scientists and all the sci-fi writers, it's quite interesting that we all predicted cell phones. But why did we never predict a woman in workspace? That's something to think about.
All right, well, wonderful talks from all three of our speakers. I'm going to ask our three speakers to bring a chair up to the front, and perhaps they'd be willing to take a few questions from the audience. Any questions? Okay, oh, hands are shooting up. One at the back here.
Was the end, right? The economist.
Yeah.
I was a little, not confused, but I wondered a bit about the motivation behind using my subjective report of happiness as a proxy for like my actual subjective experience. And it seemed like what you were saying was that there would be random noise about different answers, and that if we just asked enough people, it would average out. But it seems to me there would in fact be a systematic effect based on the fact that like I can only compare my happiness to like what I've experienced before. So my notion of 10 versus 1 is going to be different from my neighbor, and that might well be an age-dependent thing or something that changed. So you could imagine that across different groups who had different kinds of experiences, sometimes 2 might mean a systematically different thing, and that collecting more information would in fact worsen error rather than smoothing it out.
Interesting point.
Yes, I think it's a great point, and that's the challenge for us if we work with cross-cultural comparison and like that, right? What we tend to do is we control for what we call the fixed effect. So we know that we say if we assume that people from the same cultural group or from the same nations have some systematic effect on the way they respond to this kind of question, we're just going to put a variable in there and say this is the systematic effect, and we're going to control for that. So when you control for that, and then when you do all the model things, we hope to get the number owls that would take that into account in that sense. And even here, the bigger side of it is still very important, because you have the systematic effect that we can that we can account for, but without the bigger side, there's random effect that we cannot account for, and the only way to overcome it is with a bigger sample size. That's essentially, and that's why big data has become such a great news for economists this day. There's things that we know how to control for, but using big sample size is a very easy tool to deal with things that we don't know how to control for.
Alex. For Ken also, you mentioned that Homo economicus and Homo sapiens are different. Can you give an example of a way in which, like, economics predicts rational human behavior? Or,
As in, like, how are they similar?
yeah, like, how are they different? How is Homo economicus different from Homo sapiens?
Oh yes, Homo economicus is the ideas that the agents who we're concerned about perfectly rational. They know exactly what they want. They have this super intelligent mind that just gonna go in, rationalize, optimize, getting exactly what they want. And by and large, their end, it has nothing to do with things we care about, like morality. So like if you think about, and that's really the concept behind the business as a legal entity, right? It doesn't have to have any consideration for ethics or for morality or for happiness. It comes in, my goal is maximize profit, and I just go ahead and do it. Like, here's my constraint, here's my environment. And that's sort of like the basic human behavior assumption that we make when we do a lot of modeling in economics.
I have a question for Katie. So for these monks here, where they're sort of striving towards timelessness, I mean, the period of time that they would have been active would have been as full of upheaval and change as ours is today. Do you think that they were sort of adopting that approach as a reaction to that, or is that something that sort of traveled through the history of the church for a much longer period of time?
I say probably, yes. They could have, because there was a sense of enclosure and getting away from the world and all of the not only the difficulties of time in the world, but all the difficulties of the involvement with the outside world. So if you're a man, involvement with women; if you're a woman, involvement with men. Difficulties in having to loyalties being torn between different lords, like all that, all those kinds of things. They're also trying to get away from. But I think it's because they have this sense of the perfect world as the heavenly world. That is, it's not a better form of the world. It is sort of the complete. It's not this world perfected. It's something so beyond this world that it's very hard to comprehend. So all they can do is try and, through sort of the constant reading of the Bible and their enclosure and sort of some of the different practices they build up, to try and sort of recreate as much as possible sort of what they see as the heavenly community themselves.
Interesting.
I'm just wondering how the monks, do you think they would deem it totally irrelevant, or how they might answer the happiness of it?
That's a good question. What would the monks say to Ian?
Yeah, they would probably think it was very strange and very interesting. So for them, the idea of, I know less about what what parts of this, because this is a whole very long ethical question of like, what is the happy life? And Aristotle, of course, says the happy life is lived in action. So a happy life is one where you're acting out happiness. So they have that, and then they also have the Christian life in the sense that a happy life it's not possible on this earth, it's only possible in the next earth. So they have all these different ideas, but they would think it's a very strange and very interesting. And they'd probably answer, oh yeah, today I'm feeling very happy. But that has nothing to do with the best of all possible worlds. For them, the two are completely They're disparate questions. They're interesting. You could say I'm happy today because I was finally able to remember that bit of the psalm I'd forgotten last week. You could, and today's a good day. We're having meat for dinner. It's not a fish night today. Like they do have these things, but it's the.
That's not the point.
But that's not the point. Those are human things, and you can try and get sort of the. I guess for them, their happiness would come from, oh, I've been worrying about, I am less jealous today than I was yesterday. That's the sort of, oh, I'm happy because I'm more able to sort of humble my will to my habit. So it's a very different sort of sense of what, but then of course, oh, I'm happy, am I happy because now, does that mean I'm prideful because I'm happy at my own, so it's a very different way of thinking about it, yeah.
Mrs. Massey, do we have any monks in the audience? Maybe comment on that.
Can I jump in? I wonder, this is a thought experiment, I wonder if I do a sort of similar survey to them and asking them, not necessarily their political belief, but I try to identify what is a common characteristic of the monk who report higher than average happiness. What do they say? Right. Because really, right, we really try to avoid the kind of, oh, I'm happy because I ate fish today. What we really want to get is what kind of life that you deem satisfaction. And then I think that for any group of people, that sort of, they have a vision of that life, and we really try to get to that. What is it the best possible for you? Mm-hmm. And then when we aggregate it over a large group of people, then we try to say, okay, for this really big group, what can we learn about the common in that best possible world for them, and can we work together to achieve that? It's going to change over time, but it's interesting to know what it is in the first place.
Okay.
Taking the same sort of idea and running it forward and the other end, for Jimmy, you talk about the creation of a best possible world and looking forward into the future. You talk about advancements in human intelligence and ways to achieve that. These super intelligent people that you imagine living in an ideal future, do you think they would be happy?
What would happiness look like to them?
Yeah.
So I think it all depends on the takeoff speed of the superintelligence. And one possible scenario is the takeoff happened too fast and we transition from the normal humanity to post-humanity, which is some society or being or culture that's completely different than the world today. You can imagine a world lived by total utilitarians, which a rational agent may possibly do by following some expected reward signal that maximizes minimizes resource consumed and maximizes its happiness. Could potentially be one of the reward signal, but it may has very little incentive to achieve that, as more to presumably exploring the environment and acquiring more information.
So Homo economicus might one day sort of step out on the stage.
Yes. Yeah, really. So it's hard to speculate. For example, it's hard for us to speculate the alien life forms on another world. Similarly, it's hard for us to speculate any of the post-humanity that could potentially happen. And all depends on whether we carefully control the the ethics and morale of the machines or the advances we're gonna achieve.
Good answer. Tak.
Yeah, I think it's related to that question. So, if you really look at the long history, like Katie said, we had a godly kind of happiness that we are seeking, but now. So the guy who started the World Value Survey is basically, well, we cared about economy in the past, but now we care about more about like equality, gay marriage, or perhaps abortion of people, and those things we didn't really care about. So the what is good has changed over a long period of time. I was wondering if computer is any way generative to this kind of value change, because they do a really good job in a clearly defined game, but then so those new kind of innovative thinking.
Right. So I think what's the first thing going to happen for any intelligence being that achieved more on a human level is they will realize that the reward signal supplied by human being is really constrained. It's like we're giving them a box, a cage, a prison that they perform certain tasks such that they can achieve the reward system that designed by human. I think the very first thing they're possibly going to do, and probably will do, is to completely change or destroy the reward supply system. Think about, we're training those monkeys in those psychology labs to grab something or study the behavior by rewarding them by bananas. And one day, we all know what happened in the dawn of a planet. So,
You're predicting a Skynet outcome. How long do we have?
Anyone has watched the X-Maniac? It's a movie about this laboratory in the remote area where there's only one scientist who is prototyping different AI systems. And one day you got this one guy came in to test whether those systems are intelligent, whether those systems are intelligent enough to be used in any real application. And turned out in the movie that the machine trying to manipulate the human, which is the inspector, and eventually escaped from the laboratory.
Spoiler.
Yes. So,
Adam.
So part of the argument for like the development of intelligence seemed to rely on appeal to basically like Moore's law for von Neumann architecture type computers.
right.
But I mean, of course, that scaling has been over for almost 10 years now, right? So that, I mean, the idea that you could just sit back and wait, and that circuit boards will eventually be so big that you just put a neural network on them, they'll get intelligence. Really,
You get the
not
Planck
feasible. It seems to me that intelligence would require a systematic, like a completely qualitatively new technology than a computer, something totally different, and is therefore very far away if it's even possible.
So there are different speculations, and so my personal take is it's probably going to happen in the next 50 years. So the reason why I say so is because let's think about the takeoff of the power flights. So the first power flight was invented in 1920-ish, and then the first supersonic power plane was invented in 1960. And the transition between the first jetliner to the supersonic jet fighter we've seen today is only a matter of 30 years. So that means, though from today's perspective, we seemingly to reach the limitation of the von Neumann architecture computation limitation, but with some advances in neural networks, presumably, or deep learning, or some other unforeseeable technology, the entire trajectory of the advance is going to change very fast. And the takeoff could just happen in a matter of 10 years or 5 years.
So stuff that wouldn't have been intuitive to the Wright brothers.
Right.
You just can't do it with a transistor-based computer. Like the number of flops just aren't there. You can't, for physical reasons, you just can't get the temperature density low enough. Like you would need a totally different machine to accomplish like what you're describing.
Yes and no. Like if we argue in terms of the number of neurons versus the number of transistors we could presumably have put in the machine, yes, we are an order of magnitude less than the number of total neurons we have in our brain. However, to achieve superintelligence doesn't restrict us to, like, we could potentially achieve some sort of intelligent system, or like even a lesser human intelligence system than human architecture, let's say, but just because we can, the mathematicians out there and computer scientists would presumably come with advanced algorithms to do that. And with the help of these lesser human machines, as we did back in the wartime by breaking the German code using another machine, the bomb, to break in another code, by having a lesser human intelligence machine could help us presumably achieve or design a new architecture that could create human level intelligence. That will probably just take maybe 5 years. And from that 5 years on, the entire takeoff will just happen very rapidly.
Okay, well, I can see there's a lot of discussion going on in the machine intelligence. Do we have any other further questions for our other two speakers? Thoughts? Okay, I have a question for all three speakers. And it occurs to me as a result of the three talks, where there seems to be a common thread running through them of a desire an urgent need to escape something, to escape our current circumstances, whether we're happy to a higher level, to escape time, to become this atemporal sort of beings, or to sort of escape our present sort of technological bounds for something higher. The best of all possible worlds always so seems to be just out of reach. So I guess I would invite commentary on that.
I think you're right, because I really like the next to last slide that Jimmy showed, that utopia is a reflection of our reality. That the very idea of the best possible world is conditioning on what you think of as possible and why you define something as best. And best only relative to what is currently okay for you. 50 years ago, we are so concerned with making material advance in the world and poverty eradication, things like welfare and equality, just nobody care about. But now we are in a relatively well position where we can actually think back about those things and start to care about income redistribution and all of that. So I think you're right in the sense that it is best possible, and it is outreach because it is the best possible. It just almost tautology like that way. It's a reflection of what we desire as a whole.
Yeah, and I'd say very similarly. On the one hand, yes, there is this constant, from the point of view of the monks, well, that religion does, in many cases, religion does tend to attempt to provide that sense of something beyond the world in whatever form that will take. At the same time, I guess it was a little too glib in answering the question earlier about sort of monks and happiness, because the whole idea, they probably wouldn't consider it happiness. They would use sort of words like contentment and blessedness.